Welcome to week 10. Week 10 focuses on human resources management. It's a very exciting area in the tourism hospitality. I'm going to just focus on, sometimes I look at it from a generic perspective because the human resources department is in all areas of a lot of industry. We're going to look at how we deal with this in the hospitality industry, and I'll give you highlight some issues. I'll highlight also some examples that I use in specifically to our hospitality industry. As you know that we're going through some very trying times right now with COVID-19. Most of you have brought up the subject of employees losing their jobs or being laid off. And we don't know whether they'll be reinstated if their organization goes through the COVID-19, and when they get back into the hospitality industry. Anyway, this department, like when I do tutorials, I ask students, what is the role of the human resources management or department? What is their primary role? What are their main goals and objectives? So that's what we'll discuss in this session. Also use examples, some of the issues that are very important. We'll also look at trends, okay, because you know that with globalization and the evolution of hospitality, historical perspective, and from time to time where you had conventional or traditional human resource practices. You all obviously know that with people being very multi-skilled, with the labor force being very flexible, people work from home like now what we're doing, and like what you're doing, you're working from home online. We'll look at areas where technology or um, social media platform has had an impact, or internet for that matter, on human resource practice or operations. Okay, so let's go on further. You will get tutorial questions with regards to this. So what our topic objectives is what we want to achieve at the end of this topic. We look at human resources in hospitality, or a lot of people say HR, abbreviated HR. What's its role in hospitality in general? I will give you specific problems, specific problem areas, specific examples, um, specific issues. We look at JDs and JS and standards or benchmarks. So just want to highlight to you what is JD. JD is the job description. Okay, the job description of the, the task, responsibilities, and duties of a particular job. Okay, we'll go through those examples later in your tutorial, but this is very important when you join an organization. Job specification are basically skills, abilities, and experience and qualification that will enable a person to do a particular job. Right? So the example could be, what is a job description for a food server? Obviously, one of the job descriptions for a food server is to set a table, very simple ones. Knowing the sequence of service, how to clear a table, how to take a order correctly, right? And most of this is denoted by a benchmark, a standard. There's a SOPs for each part or task of a job. Like SOPs are standing operating procedures. So how to take an order, there's a procedure on how to do that. And whether the employee knows how to do it to the best of his ability, depending on, I've used this word in class, where they're competent or not competent. Okay, it's either you're competent, you cannot be on the fence. Either you know how to take an order, all right, or you don't know how to do. And to take an order, what are some specific skills that are required to do that? That's what job specification is. What type of educational level that enables someone to do a particular job as such, right? Then we look at determining productivity standards. Okay, how do you determine the productivity standards? Very close to what I just talked about, benchmarking and identifying and drawing out the SOPs for each task in a job. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about employment related laws in the Pacific and in Fiji, because HR has to do with human resource policies, human resource planning, and it very much has to do with the labor laws. So, in a way, if you work in a hotel, you have to make sure that how much you're paying workers, the amount of hours that they're allowed to work has to be in line with the labor laws of your country. All right, making sure that you do not employ someone below the age, below the, like a lot of countries like in India, and other third member countries, developing countries are using minors, and that's child labor, right? And a lot in the garment factories and etc. And that's actually breaking the law, breach of the law. So it's very important. We'll also look at, because employment relation has to do with when employees complain about their wages, then they go through arbitration. Most of you will do human resource management in management and public administration. We'll go through these issues, but from here we'll just look at the basics, the fundamentals of employment relations and the laws that govern. So if you become HR manager, you should be very thorough and abreast with the laws in Fiji, if you work in Fiji, and if you're working in Solomon Islands, Cook Islands, Samoa, wherever you're working, you gotta be abreast with those laws. Then we look at selection, criteria, and orientation. This is the process of where, all right, so recruitment, selection, orientation is where you hire people for jobs or a specific job in your company, and that's part of the role of the human resources manager. Then we look at appraisals. What are performance appraisal? What is compensation benefits? How will you compensate your workers or worker through the different through monetary terms, compensation administration, wages according to their qualification, excuse me, and the experience. And what are the assistance programs that your organization has designed for them in terms of further their career or their career path? So you're like an advisor, a counselor when there's sexual harassment cases, when they, disgruntled employees, when they're not happy with their job or the working environment. You are like the middle person, the mentor, the counselor, someone who guides your employees and resolves conflicts within. Okay, when the worker is not happy that with their conditions, they will go to the labor department, or they go on a strike, or they go to the unions, and these stakeholders play a vital role. This is when you, as a HR manager or personnel, you know before, when I worked in the industry with a small, they call it the personnel department. Okay, it's basically the same um, role that they play today. If you cannot solve it within the organization, then the person can go outside to the unions or to the labor department to further their, they're not happy with the decision, and they want to find, get a better compensation for what's happened to them, if they've, I weren't paid or weren't treated fairly, or unfair dismissal, etc. So we'll talk about those areas. So let's look at the quotes that have been given by our, and this is in Walker's too, your textbook. One of the quotes talks about to be effective in dealing with people, because obviously you know that HR deals with people. This is a back of house department, a support center. HR needs a strategic view of the future and strategies to achieve that view. Right? So it's very important. What he's trying to say is that, people, dealing with people, obviously it's not like assets, right, or monetary value, where you can cut, you can change, you can modify, you know these assets and monetary value, they don't have feelings. With people, you have feelings. You're talking about empathy, you're talking about emotional management, feel, you're talking about people bringing different skills, different attributes, different temperaments. So learning how to deal with them is important. And furthermore, he talks about, or they talk about, that you need to have a strategic view of the future and the strategies to achieve that. What it basically means that what will happen in the long run, in the long term? Where do you see your company and how your company grows, and how do you want to groom and change the mindset or perception of your employees so that you can meet those needs in the future? It's very, very important. So you don't want to be stagnant. You want to change with time. So that's what he's trying to put through. Warwick and Tracy, 2004. That's when the book was published. Page 376 talks about the need to demonstrate the impact of HR on firms. Performance is a current and future priority. See, so that's it. Just reinforces what I just talked about above, meaning that you must to meet the needs of the future and the current priority. You must demonstrate very good planning, very good policies put in place in the organization. Okay, so now let's look at this pyramid. Yeah, let's look at the pyramid. All right. So to understand HR in hospitality, we look at these areas. It looks at these legal issues. What are the legal issues? What are the what does the Labor Act constitute? What is the turnover? What is the staff turnover for your organization? And you need to know changing demographics. You need to understand these three issues, all right? And I think we'll go through this question in your tutorial next week. Remember, this week we're talking about marketing, but next week we'll be talking about staff turnover. What are the legal issues that are currently important right now in hospitality and tourism and with HR policies? And we look at changing demographics. Changing demographic refers to, you know, how much women we have in the workforce. You need to understand the labor markets. Do we have more skilled and qualified hospitality employees? What are the minimum qualifications we need in as a management trainee or cadet trainee, that we recruit in our organization? So that's important. So you need to understand the the demographics. You need to understand where they're from. Are we getting more university students or polytech students or skill students that are coming on board, etc. So to understand that, you need to do some research in these areas as a HR manager. So let's look at the legal issues of HR manager. And remember, I spoke to you about excuse me, about Employment Relations Act, which is from 2006. You need to be very thorough with that. You also need to be thorough with these are acts. These are um, legal legislations that is stipulated by the law of the land or by government. All right. You have the Health and Safety Work Act, 1996. All right, and these acts are reviewed over a period of time when they want to amend the act. And the Health and Safety Act ensure that your environment, your work environment is OHS compliant, it's safe, it's clean, and it must meet the standards, right, stipulated by this act. Exactly like what the Employment Relations Act. The Employment Relations Act will stipulate things like what's the minimum wage you should give a waiter or waitress? What's the minimum wage for supervisor or manager? How many hours? How much the maximum hours of an employee in the of an executive chef? Okay, what are the what are other some benefits that are given to them? And into more detail, you get the wages regulation and hotel catering trades order. Okay, so hotels look into this order and find out these are the minimum wage rate for this particular job. All right. Let's look at our next slide. All right. HR, remember I used the word HR roles and planning. All right, so very, very important. One of the first things that we need to do is that we need to identify future needs, all right? We need to identify how many employees we need in the near future for this particular restaurant that's going to open up in our hotel. You link that to strategic plan, and then talent management and retention. Talent management is looking for, so linking to strategic plans is having the goals put in place, and talent management and retention is just looking for the right caliber, or looking for the right type of staff with the skills that you And all this has to do with research. What particular skills? Do they have to have a degree as the minimum qualification, or do they have to have a certificate or diploma? In what specific area? Is it hospitality and tourism? Is it hotel management? Or is it specifically with culinary? And retention basically meaning how will you retain the employee? Okay, so let's look at the cycle. You hire and you train the employees. You develop JD and JS. You write them out, making sure that they are clear. Okay, very important. This is one of the things that you have found out with your project that you are doing right now. Your job description and job specification must be very specific to your work area. Then we look at the benefits and payroll. Okay, what are the benefits? Would they get a house, a car? Do they have superannuation? Do they have health insurance or life insurance paid by the organization or coming from the employees? And what's the payroll like? What's the bracket that they're sitting on? Finance and community development. This is where social responsibility comes in. All right. Also, where facilitation of training and development, career prospects. Except you want to groom your employees. Like what are you doing in your project, where you are now, and what's your career path, and where would you see your future aspirations. All right. And then we look at the legal requirements. What are the legal requirements in terms of your job? What are your um, you know your pay structure, how much they are allowed to work within a certain period of time, um, within the organization, from 12 hours to 14 hours, etc. What's legally binding with regards to their job? If it's a contract job, do you know that most jobs are moving into contractual agreements? And when it's a contractual agreement, when you sign a contract like a 3-year, 4-year, 5-year contract, and how is it being renewed? Is it being renewed based on performance? And that contract itself is a legal document, all right, between you, the employee, and the employer. So when you get a contract, you need to read it very carefully. Some contracts are not very specific, so you need to get. And if you're not sure before you sign it, get legal advice on the contract. So very important, what's stipulated in the contract. So many of you will be. A lot of countries overseas have contractual jobs because there's advantages and disadvantages. Okay, let's look at task analysis. The task analysis helps you deduce and design a job description, job specification. So what task analysis is, what it is basically dissecting a particular job, dissecting into different tasks, and analyzing it, which means that you have to do a research. Like when I said, when a waiter takes an order, what are a few things that she should do? All right. First, she might have to meet and greet the guest. Is she competent enough to do that? Can she do it or not, or he? And so you divide all those tasks into smaller tasks, and then when you do that, this is where the research takes place: observation, interviews, research. All right, and then you design before you design the actual job. Once you've done that, you collected all the information, then you draw up a job description and a job specification. And out of the job description identifies the activities that are involved in the job, and the specification is the knowledge, skills, and qualifications that are needed for the job. And I just spoke to you about that earlier. Okay, now we will look into productivity standards. Productivity standards is the amount of work performed by an employee in a fixed period of time, basically meaning that if you work for the Fiji Times and you're a coupon sorter, so I hire you as a coupon sorter, okay, and I say, there are 3 bags. This is from this competition. If you can sort out, you have a partner, and we have different teams that sort out coupons because you have different coupons for different organizations. And I said, you, your partner, will have to sort out like maybe 3,000 coupons and divide it into the date, the time period, coupon sorting for the different prizes, and you get like 3 hours for that. So I would say 3 hours you must finish this. Or another example is a housemaid must finish at least 12 to 15 rooms in a day, whether it's a checkout, standard, uh, uh, it's occupied room where she has to dust and clean and mop, and when it's VIP room, exclusive room, or a presidential suite, etc. It's the amount of work that something that you should achieve within a given time. And if a worker does not achieve that within a given time, they're incompetent. That's basically what it is. Because in doing so, when you find out how much work do I know, how much other, it says the amount of work performed by employee. So what's the amount of work? You do that through a period of time through research. You get advice from your departmental heads. You would have done it yourself, and you must put a fixed period of time because it's important for your, because time is money. You all must realize that time is money. And if you look at Dobson, the textbook that you have, it talks about these are the factors, yeah? The cost factor, because if they spend longer time completing a job, you're paying them more, and so that's the cost factor. The company is bearing the cost. Okay, the time factor would be, all right, what would the time factor be? Is the fixed period of time, right? They must complete it within that duration, right? So we would say, we look at it as like a timeline. You must have a timeline in place so that you know that you're achieving that objective within that time frame, and contribution to team effort, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if you're working as a team and the team is divided into, you remember you do that in class and I give you a time frame and I said within this 20 minutes you must accomplish this. So when the leader divides the team, he has to ensure that everybody accomplishes that goal in finishing in time. So one team will finish and two teams haven't finished, they'll bring the whole group down because they haven't finished. So it's just like how you're contributing to a group project. Okay, you must remember that your contribution will have an impact on the group's performance. Okay, let's remember I talked about recruitment and selection. Recruitment happens before selection. So you have the internal promotion. All right, internal means internal recruitment, where the recruitment is done internally. What happens is when a job is vacant, when there's a vacancy, the code of practice is organizations normally recruit internally, so they advertise internally through a memo or on their staff notice board. And if there is an employee who has the skills and abilities and qualifications and they want to apply, they may apply for the job, right? Because number one, it saves a lot of money. The employee knows the corporate culture, they know the organization's goals and objectives, they already fit into the organization, so it's easy for them to be transferred or be promoted to a particular job. Employee referrals, this is very, when an employee is transferred from one hotel chain to another with the same company, that's what employee referrals mean. Applicant files, okay, this is the largest amount of, the most common, which is you have applicants who apply. You don't have a vacancy, but they apply this, you might be an employer that applies and say, oh, I know there's no vacancy in the newspaper, but I'm just putting my application through. I'll be graduating in November, and if there is a job available, here's my contact and my CV, etc. That's when you put their application, you reply to them with a response saying, we thank you for your interest and application. We will put your application in our files and let you know should a job arise. Transfers within the company, okay, within the same company. So you have transfers from marketing, from front office to reservation, or somebody looks for a job, they're transferred from reservation to sales and marketing, or from one department to another, like one outlet to another outlet. Okay, so like from the breakfast restaurant, you're transferred to fine dine. All right, still in the food and beverage area. Advertising, the most common type of job sourcing. Okay, advertising on notice boards, on school boards at university, advertising newspaper, word of mouth, on magazines, on the internet, etc., 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 and other sources through careers fair, through employment agencies, etc. So we'll discuss this further in your tutorials. Remember, you have internal sources of recruitment I talked about, you have external. And I'm going to ask you questions like, what are the advantages of internal sources of recruitment? And what are the disadvantages? What are the external advantages of sourcing labor, and what are the disadvantages? All right. And some of it I already talked about, like if you recruit internally, it's cheaper for your organization. The incumbent is aware of the policies, um, aware of the rules and regulations, the corporate culture, etc. With external, it costs the company a lot of money, obviously. But the good thing is there's new blood, new ideas shared, new it's very good for the company because you're getting um, new creative ideas by the employees from outside, right? So selection, this is what you'll all be going through. Some of you have gone through because you hold jobs and you work part-time. So you have several interviews, right? You may have the first interview um, and maybe an aptitude test, right? Or like the second one says aptitude test, right? Where you have to sit for a listening test or a handwritten test, or you have to go through so many. Like when you begin, when many of those who are interested in joining an airline, if you want to be a cabin crew or flight attendant, okay, you might have to go through several interviews. If you go through the first interview and they call you back, which means that you've gone through the first phase. You might have to go through a swimming test, kitchen test. I use a very good example. When Sofitel first opened, they came down to the catering school where I used to teach, and the chefs who were just finishing, they gave them 3 eggs, a tomato and onion, and they asked them to cook an omelet. And if the omelet turned out well, according to their standards, they got through the first test, an aptitude test, right? An aptitude test can be a singing, a practical test can be dancing. If you want to become a dancer in a theater, etc., it can be in different forms, but more practical oriented. And then you have references or referees, all right? And nowadays we look at referees because they call the referees and do a reference check, right? So I've done that with a lot of our graduates. Then which references they make recommendations based on the person's ability when they were a student or when they're working for the organization. Other tests are their medical examination, like drug screening, tests, health status, okay? Like if you want to join the army or the navy, you have to have go through that you're fit, medically fit. In the war, in World War One, World War Two, young boys who are recruiting for the army in America or other places in the world, if they had like heart trouble, they were had very bad asthmatic cases, they weren't allowed to join the army because they were not physically fit. So they will basically be a liability to the army rather than an asset. Okay. Then once the recruitment process is done, you do the selection process where the interview takes place. The selection process is where you choose the best person for the job. All right, and you can see in this picture where you can obviously see how well groomed the person that's been selected. You have to have very positive. If you work positive, very clean shave, the haircut. Countries like in Japan, you shouldn't have visible tattoos. Um, and hospitality, this is very important. The warm smile. Okay, your demeanor, your your first impressions are very important, especially when you go into the interview room. And confidence is also very good, but not being overconfident. Okay, so just be if you have a firm handshake and very good deportment or body posture. We look at orientation. Once a person gets through an interview and is successful, we call this the induction program or orientation program, where you're introduced into the organization. You may go through a training process where you learn about the policies, the culture of the organization. You look at what are the benefits, what are the do's and the don'ts. You also be introduced to different departments, people you'll be working with, and you need to know their policies and rules and regulations within the organization. So these are some of the areas. The corporate's history, so the historical background of the organization. If you're joining chain hotel, you need to know more about You know, who owns the hotel, how did the hotel start, its historical perspective. Then part of the orientation induction, when induction means you being introduced, excuse me, to the organization. They tell you what benefits are available for you, safety and fire prevention, OHS, etc. Introduction of the organizational chart. Who's your first line of command or communication? How do you communicate within the organization? What are the rules and policies and regulations, etc., etc. Okay. Our next one looks at employee development. Now, when you work in the organization, obviously you don't want to spend the next 10, 15 years in the same position, like being a bank teller in maybe NZ, right? You obviously want to grow, and to grow, that's why we say that with learning, it's always ongoing. It's not static. So HR manager whole is plays a vital role in this area. So employment development is very important in terms of um, an employee's career path, right? So you're not stagnant, you are focused on where you want to be in the next 5, 10 years. And that's why when we get you to introduce yourself in the first week of tutorial, we ask you, where do you see yourself in the next 5 to 10 years? It's always good to pick that goal, because not saying that it will change. Obviously, it'll change through the years. You'll probably work in something that you didn't expect, in an area like maybe an NGO or managing your own business, etc. So these are some of the things that the employee development is more concerned with: enhancing existing skills, motivating for mid-level managers. That's true. So when students like you who are a graduate, you normally apply for a cadet training or management training program. So they put you in different parts of the hotel so that you are trained and are well abreast with the different procedures and learn how the different departments coordinate and how they operate. And then you do on the job or maybe off the job training, where you learn non-technical training, which is generic, which is effective communication, team building, which we do also in class, motivation, and leadership. So all these skills you develop as you work from time to time. And some people may take long, some employees may take a short period of time. But it's very important that you develop them now as you are in universities. Okay, the next topic, we've got only a few more slides. We've got performance appraisal. And I think we talked about this very briefly in other lectures that was leading to this. And a performance appraisal is based on your performance. And when an employee, what happens is that, so you have two. You have cumulative performance appraisal, and you have the summative performance appraisal. What does is that and it's normally happens when, so you have a probationary period when you join an organization, and when they do a performance appraisal on you, they compare that with when you first joined and how much you've achieved. And if you're still incompetent within the probationary period, they'll probably extend your probationary period, or they won't hire you. So it's very important that you perform in your probationary period. And it's normally 6 months to a year when you get a job. All right, so very, very important that you perform to the best abilities, you arrive early on time, you complete your job, you're competent, very good communication skills. These are all the things they'll look at. So some of the positive attributes is feedback to employees. This is what performance appraisal, the objective of performance appraisal. It's used as a personal development plan to see where you're going, how you're doing within the next 6 months to a year. It establishes rationale for promotion and raise. Yes, so when you apply for a promotion or raise, you'd have to go through a performance appraisal. That's the norm, right? To see how well you've done, what have you brought new to the table, etc. And it helps establish objectives for training. All right, so if they find out that you don't have, incompetent in Fidelio or Room Master, you'll have to go for that particular training. Now, the next role or the objective of compensation administration is to deal with salary and wages, making sure that employees are paid according to their work or to their qualification and the amount of effort they put in. So companies use bonuses. They use, some of the questions I'll ask you is, in tutorial is what's the difference between wages and salary. All right, wages and salary. You look at other type of benefits. And remember, we talked about earlier with the wages regulation, what's the minimum wage rate for particular jobs in an organization, especially with the hotel industry. So supervisor, rank and file worker, or operational worker, a manager all get different wages according to their contribution to the organization. And you got to match that with what they contribute. Other things that I talked about in the beginning, and I won't go too much on this because I expressed this in the beginning, was the employee assistance program. Just encourages you to, and how you motivate your employees, basically with the services of counseling. Employees who are not happy with how they've been treated, they're not happy with the job or the supervisor, you can go to HR and sit down and they have counseling service or get more advice on their working environment. Referral association, emphasis on prevention and intervention, which is very important. You look at areas, a lot of organizations find absenteeism at the workplace a major issue, workers coming in late, drug and alcohol problems, people bring this to the workplace. A lot of people bring their domestic issues to the workplace, and that's why some organizations do not hire a husband and wife because they bring their dirty laundry to the organizations. And so some organizations have a policy that family members don't work in the same area. But this really depends, yeah, on the type of organization, the policies that are being given. Uh, Personal finance, marital, career, job, and legal issues are other areas. We also look at benefits. Okay, makes up the largest percentage of payroll expenditure. We look at mandatory benefits and voluntary. So mandatory would be things like maternity leave or from the employee relations bill, um, medical cover if it's covered by the organization, worker compensation, superannuation. These are mandatory. Voluntary benefits would be like health insurance. Sometimes it becomes mandatory, but it's optional, or life insurance, right? And that's also very important. Okay. Um, so managers get a lot of benefits also because of their role and their job. So they get, they get a car or a house or housing allowance. Um, their children's fees are paid, and other things, travel benefits, etc. So as you go up the ladder, you'll probably be experiencing those things when you get to the industry. We with the employee relations, we have workplace harassment, which is a major area in hospitality and other industries. It happens everywhere around the world. Okay, where you have racial discrimination, sexual harassment. But employers are also very responsible for maintaining a workplace free from harassment. Because if you want to have a very healthy, um, good working environment, you must minimize or eradicate these types of problems. So it's very important, making sure that your workers are free of this and that they are happy. Okay, so very good working environment. So lastly, we look at these are the trends, yeah? We look at the trends, and the trends change from time to time because of globalization. Like I said, with how I talked about the labor markets have changed. People work from home. People are able to do flexi hours. You are going to be bring into the new workforce new ideas. So the labor markets have changed. And you remember in the 50s and 60s, more men were working than women because women were not really allowed to work then. When you look at the history of America, the US, where there were more whites working than blacks. The blacks were more slaves. There were more blue-collar job workers because they weren't allowed to work in the office area, white-collar jobs. So, like I'm just talking about how the trends evolve with time, and you know that with the internet, a lot of things have changed. People are able to work from their own home, from their living room, from their workstations. People set up their own businesses on Facebook, have their own website. Okay. In addition with that, with all these these, increased diversity, critical labor shortage in some countries, increased use of flexi time and employee focus on employee retention. Trying to retain your employees is also very important. Filling F&B positions, food and beverage, people in the labor pool with basic reading and writing and math skills is very important. So the people some people are illiterate. Increasing concerns of legal issues. So legal issues change through time and time. Those are very important things. So in summary, we talk about managing human resource strategy. We talked about legal issues in hospitality. We looked at job description, job specification, and productivity. Looking after teams and the role that HR plays. Training development with HR, and that's ongoing. Most of you sitting here will probably have you probably have your eye in working in this area. And remember, it's a support center. It's back of house in the hotel industry. So if you're someone that's very good in dealing with people, a very good counselor, this is the area. And you know that you could specialize in HR, and some of you are actually majoring in HR whilst doing tourism. Okay, so please read through the text, the relating text to this, and go through the PowerPoint slide to reinforce your learning. Look at the questions on Moodle for your tutorial for next week for this subject. And I've also attached on this PowerPoint, not the PowerPoint, but in this message, your tutorial for this week. All the best and keep safe. Thank you.